Another series I produce here on YouTube called The God Distraction is based on the idea that there is absolutely nothing we can demonstrably know about God, his existence, will, or character, making God's existence, for all intents and purposes, irrelevant to our lives. Some have misinterpreted that statement to suggest that I'm saying there couldn't even be evidence for God's existence. Nothing could be farther from the truth. In fact, I'm a non-believer exactly because I emphatically believe that there not only could be evidence for God's existence, there should be mountains and mountains of it stacked up so high all around us that we can't see anything but. For instance, for the last 2,000 years, Christians of almost every sect quoted their Bible saying that death was the result of sin, and that before the original sin of Adam, roughly 6,000 to 14,000 years ago, depending on how you calculate, there was no such thing as death. Had we never found the remains of a creature, human or animal, whose death occurred outside that time frame, that would be some very compelling evidence indeed. And such evidence, had there been a God who inspired Genesis, would be used by Christians at every turn to argue quite convincingly the existence of God and his role inspiring the biblical writers. Likewise with the flood story or the Exodus. Such huge events should have and would have left a massive evidentiary footprint that we shouldn't even really have to look for. The same is true with the New Testament. Herod's murder of the infants, dead people rising from their graves and hanging out around Jerusalem, these things should not be confined to the reports of the gospel writers. Those are the kinds of things of which people generally tend to take note and remember and write about. And there were plenty of people writing at that time. The Jews kept records. The Romans kept records. Heck, record stores kept records. As did the people at Qumran and Nag Hammadi. But while we're talking about the New Testament, let's not forget that Jesus told his followers that they would do greater works than he did. And he raised people from the dead. Jesus also said believers would be able to uproot trees and cast them into the sea. In fact, I believe his exact words were, "I will do whatever you ask in my name." So there's another laundry list of possible evidence that would have me thinking twice about this whole crazy atheism nonsense. My former religion, Mormonism, was founded on a book which was supposed to have told the real history of the Native Americans via revelation from God himself. According to that book, the Book of Mormon, Native Americans should have Hebrew DNA, but they don't. We also should have found vast Middle-Age civilizations, millions of steel swords, chariots by the tens of thousands, and all the horses that pulled those chariots. But we didn't. Had we found those things, that would have been some very impressive evidence with which Mormons could powerfully, rightfully argue their case and claim a connection to something truly transcendent. And guess what? That's exactly what they'd be doing out there on their bikes in their magic underwear with their white shirts and dark suits. But note, while they would absolutely be using that evidence to argue their case had that evidence existed, the fact that it doesn't in no way suggest to them that the claims of their holy book and prophet are false. It's heads I win, tails you lose. The ball is never under that cup. And yes, that is your card, because the game is rigged, to mix metaphors. But instead of simply dismissing the claim when the evidence is missing, what believers have done is create an industry of people whose job it is to explain away the facts, or come up with, let's call them alternative facts, to convince you that this lack of evidence doesn't mean exactly what it means. This goes on in every religion. Instead of simply saying, I guess we were wrong about that, like every other normal, rational person on the planet would do when faced with an overwhelming lack of evidence for a claim, believers dedicate enormous time and money and energy to come up with an explanation. Any explanation, really, however far-fetched or ludicrous. And the amazing thing is, it works. Believers are satisfied however absurd the explanation. In Mormonism, one apologist argued that Joseph Smith actually mistranslated the Book of Mormon. That's right. It was mistranslated by the gift and power of God, who knew how damaging such mistranslations would be, but somehow just decided, you know what, I'm going to let that one go. Apparently, Mormonism's all-powerful God couldn't figure out a way to tell Joseph Smith what the animals here in the Americas were called. Dum 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 de dum dum dum. I've actually had Christians get mad at me and act like I'm being some kind of disingenuous asshat because I asked them to raise the dead or uproot a tree and cast it into the ocean. But that is exactly what Jesus, their supernatural, all-powerful Lord, said his followers would be able to do. And frankly, I'm not interested in an explanation of why believers can't just do that. Just put up or shut up. If you tell me you believe in an all-powerful supernatural being who said he'd give you such powers, I don't want to hear some lame excuse for why you can't do the thing he said you'd be able to do. This is how simple it would be to convince me. Go Nike on me and just do it. For Darwin's sake, when I tell people I play guitar, I don't get upset at them when they ask me to play a song. Of course, the real question here is not what evidence would convince me. The real question is, how do believers ignore this stunning lack thereof? So that's what we'll look at in part 2, along with the internal conflicts I confronted as a believer and how I resolved those conflicts and left my faith behind. I'm me. Thanks for watching.